There is a certain kind of loneliness that cuts deeper than being alone. It is being surrounded by your own family and realizing you are completely invisible to them. I sat at the corner of a fancy restaurant watching my relatives laugh at the main table. Nobody invited me to join. Then my niece looked at me, smirked, and said those words I will never forget. "We do not sit with your kind uncle." What she did not know was that I owned every property they called home. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments where you are watching from tonight. And if you have ever felt invisible in your own family, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Trust me, you will want to stay for what comes next, because the look on their faces when the truth came out was something I will never forget. Now let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Carl, and to understand that night at the restaurant, you need to know where I came from. I grew up with my older sister Linda in a small town in New Hampshire. Our father worked at a local factory doing long shifts to keep food on the table. He was not a wealthy man, but he was a good man. He taught me that hard work was the only currency that truly mattered. Then when I was 8 years old, he was killed in a workplace accident. Just like that, our world fell apart. My mother Patricia was left alone with 2 children and barely enough money to pay rent. She took on 2 jobs to keep us afloat. During the day, she worked as a cashier at a grocery store. At night, she cleaned office buildings until her hands cracked and bled. I remember waiting up for her, watching the clock tick past midnight, wondering if she would come home too tired to even say goodnight. But here is the thing about those hard years. Linda and I were close. Really close. She was 7 years older than me, and after Dad died, she became my protector. She walked me to school every morning. She cooked dinner when Mom worked late. On cold winter nights, we would huddle together under a thin blanket, listening to an old radio, making up stories about the lives we would have someday. One night, Linda held my hand and made me a promise. She said, "Carl, we are family. And family never abandons each other. No matter what happens, I will always be there for you." I believed her with every fiber of my being. Everything changed when Linda turned 22. She got a job as a secretary at a law firm in Boston. That is where she met Derek. He came from an upper-middle-class family, attended private schools, and had never known a day of struggle in his life. To Linda, he represented everything we never had: security, status, a way out. The first time Derek visited our home in New Hampshire, I saw the way he looked at our small house with its peeling paint and creaky floors. He did not say anything cruel out loud, but his eyes said enough. He looked at our home like it was something dirty. He looked at my mother the same way. Derek never ate the meals my mother prepared for him. He always had some excuse. Allergies. A sensitive stomach. I was 15 years old, but I was not stupid. I saw through his polished smile. I tried to tell Linda, but she would not listen. She was too blinded by the life he promised her. After they got married, Linda slowly drifted away from us. Phone calls that used to happen every week became monthly, then only on holidays. She stopped inviting Mom and me to family gatherings at Derek's parents' house. She acted like we were a shameful secret she needed to hide. I will never forget her wedding day. I was 17, wearing a borrowed suit that did not quite fit. Mom and I sat at the very back table, far from the main celebration. Derek's family occupied the front, laughing and toasting while we sat in silence. Linda did not come to our table once the entire night. Not once. On the drive home, my mother cried quietly in the passenger seat. She thought I did not notice, but I did. That night, I made a silent promise to myself. I would become successful. Not to prove anything to them, but to prove something to myself. I would build a life where no one could ever make me feel small again. The years after high school were brutal. I could not afford college, so I worked whatever jobs I could find. I waited tables. I delivered packages. I fixed cars at a garage for minimum wage. But every night after my shifts ended, I stayed up studying. I read books about real estate. I watched videos about investing. I learned everything I could about building wealth from nothing. By the time I was 23, I had saved enough money to make a down payment on a foreclosed house. It was a wreck. The roof leaked. The floors were rotted. But I saw potential where others saw garbage. I spent every weekend for 6 months fixing that house with my own hands. When I sold it, I made a profit of $20,000. That was my turning point. I realized that real estate was my path forward. Over the next 12 years, I built my company from the ground up. I bought distressed properties, renovated them, and either sold them or rented them out. I made smart investments. I took calculated risks. And slowly, quietly, my portfolio grew. By the time I was 35, I owned 63 properties across the greater Boston area. Apartment buildings, townhouses, a small office complex. The total value was somewhere around $18 million. But here's the thing. Nobody knew. I still drove my old Toyota. I still wore simple clothes. I never posted on social media. I never bragged. I just worked. And there was something else nobody knew. 3 of those properties were occupied by my own family. The apartment where Derek and sister Brenda lived. The townhouse where Linda and Derek raised their children. The studio apartment where my niece Megan stayed while attending college. All of them paid rent to my company every single month without having any idea that the money flowed directly into my accounts. I also bought a house for my mother. She thought she was renting it through a property management company, but the truth was, I owned it. I wanted her to live comfortably without ever worrying about money again. She had sacrificed so much for us. It was the least I could do. For 3 years I kept this secret. I figured there was no point in telling anyone. What would it change? Linda had made her choice. She had chosen Derek as world over ours. I accepted that and moved on with my life. Then my mother called me with news that changed everything. 3 days before the dinner that would change everything, my mother Patricia called me. Her voice sounded weaker than usual. She had been battling cancer for the past year, a fact she had kept hidden from Linda and Derek. Only I knew about her treatments, her hospital visits, her quiet fears. "Mom," I said, "how are you feeling today?" She paused before answering. "Carl, I want to ask you something, and I need you to say yes." I already knew what she was going to ask. She wanted me to come to the family dinner. Every year our family gathered to commemorate what would have been our grandparents' 70th wedding anniversary. Even though they had passed away years ago, the tradition continued. It was supposed to be a celebration of family. In reality, it had become another opportunity for Derek to show off, and for me to be reminded of my place at the bottom. "I do not know if this will be my last year," my mother said softly. "I just want to see everyone together. Please, Carl, for me." How could I say no? Despite everything, despite the years of being ignored and belittled, I could not refuse my dying mother. So I agreed. On the night of the dinner, I stood in front of my closet for a long time. I could have worn one of my expensive suits. I could have driven my company Mercedes. I could have walked into that restaurant and shown them exactly how successful I had become. But something held me back. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was stubbornness. Or maybe I just wanted to see how they would treat me when they thought I was still the same struggling Carl they remembered. I chose khaki pants, a simple navy polo shirt, and worn leather shoes. I took my old Toyota instead of the Mercedes. As I drove toward Boston, I told myself it would only be a few hours. I could endure anything for my mother. The restaurant was an upscale Italian place in downtown Boston. White tablecloths, crystal glasses. The kind of place where a single meal cost more than I used to make in a week. My mother was already there when I arrived, sitting alone at the reserved table. She looked frail, but her eyes lit up when she saw me. "Carl," she whispered as I hugged her. "Thank you for coming." We sat together for a few minutes, talking quietly before the others arrived. Then I heard them. Loud voices, laughter, the click of expensive heels on marble floors. Linda walked in first, wearing a designer dress and carrying a handbag that probably cost more than my first car. Behind her came Derek, his chest puffed out in a tailored suit. Their daughter Megan followed a 19-year-old who had inherited her father's arrogance. Their son Bradley, 17, trailed behind, face buried in his phone. And finally, Brenda Derrick, his younger sister, who had somehow attached herself to every family event. Linda approached our mother and gave her a quick kiss on the cheek. The kind of greeting you give an acquaintance, not the woman who sacrificed everything to raise you. Derrick shook my mother his hand like he was closing a business deal. Megan and Bradley did not even acknowledge their grandmother. They were too busy taking selfies. Then they noticed me. Linda looked at me with cold eyes. "Carl," she said flatly. No hug, no warmth. Just my name spoken like an inconvenience. Derrick did not even bother to look at me. He pretended to be busy with his phone as if my existence was not worth acknowledging. Megan scanned me from head to toe, her lip curling in obvious disdain. Without discussion, they arranged themselves at the table. Derrick positioned himself at the head with Linda, Megan, and Bradley surrounding him. Brenda squeezed in beside them. My mother was placed somewhere in the middle, and me, I was pushed to the far end of the table, alone, separated, like an afterthought. As the appetizers arrived, the conversation flowed around me but never included me. Derrick bragged about their upcoming European vacation. Linda boasted about Megan's internship at a prestigious law firm. Brenda gushed about her new apartment and its amazing location. Nobody asked me a single question. Nobody looked in my direction. Finally, I tried to break the ice. I turned to Megan and said, "Congratulations on the internship, Megan. What area of law are you studying?" She did not even look at me. She just kept talking to Bradley as if I had not spoken. Derrick noticed my attempt and smirked. "So, Carl," he said the first time he acknowledged me all evening, "still doing your little real estate thing, flipping cheap houses or whatever?" "I work in property investment," I replied calmly. Derrick chuckled. "Right, property investment." He made air quotes with his fingers. "Must be tough in this economy." Linda laughed along with her husband. Brenda added, "Oh, that sounds so hard. I feel for you." I said nothing. I just gripped my fork a little tighter and reminded myself why I was there. For Mom. Just for Mom. The main courses arrived and the conversation continued without me. At one point, the waiter brought an extra chair to the crowded end of the table where Derrick's group sat. Space was getting tight. Derrick looked around and said, "Someone should move to the other end. Plenty of room down there with Carl." Silence fell over the table. My mother looked at Linda silently, pleading with her to do something. Linda looked away. Then Megan stood up. She put her hands on her hips and spoke loudly enough for everyone in the private dining room to hear. "Okay, let me make this clear," she announced. "We do not sit with your kind Uncle Carl. We just do not. Look at us and look at you. You do not belong here. You never did. Nobody defended me." Derrick smiled with satisfaction. Linda stared at her plate. Brenda covered her mouth in fake shock, her eyes gleaming with amusement. Bradley held up his phone, recording the moment. I looked at my mother. Tears were streaming down her face. Something inside me shifted. For years I had accepted their treatment. I had stayed quiet. I had kept my success a secret because I did not want to stoop to their level. But watching my sick mother cry while her own granddaughter humiliated her son, I realized that silence was no longer an option. I stood up slowly. Everyone expected me to leave, to walk away with my tail between my legs just like I had done so many times before. Instead, I smiled. For the first time all evening, I genuinely smiled. "You know what, Megan," I said. "You are absolutely right. Let me show you exactly what my kind looks like." I pulled out my phone. The table went quiet. Derrick laughed nervously. "What are you doing?" "Calling an Uber to leave early." I ignored him. I opened my property management application and found the file I was looking for. "Brenda," I said, turning to Derrick, his sister, "you love your new apartment, right? 7th floor corner unit view of the park." Brenda blinked in confusion. "How do you know that?" "Because I own that building. The entire building. 42 units. All mine." I turned my phone screen toward her, showing the ownership documents. Her face went pale. Derek stood up. "That is ridiculous. You are lying." I did not respond to him. Instead, I looked at Megan. "And you, dear niece, your apartment near the university, $700 a month. Great deal for that neighborhood, right?" Megan frowned. "Dad found that place. It was a good deal." I shook my head. "No, I found that place. Because it is my building. I have been giving you a discounted rate because despite everything I still considered you family." I showed her the lease agreement. My company's name was clearly listed as the landlord. Her father's signature was at the bottom. Megan's face went white. She opened her mouth but no words came out. Derek slammed his hand on the table. "This is insane. You expect us to believe that you of all people own these properties?" I turned to face him directly. "Derek, the townhouse on Beacon Hill, the one you have been renting for 3 years. You pay $4,500 a month to a company called Sterling Properties." His eyes narrowed. "How do you know our rent?" "Because Sterling Properties is my company. I founded it 12 years ago. You have been writing checks to me every single month." I showed him the documents, the deed to the townhouse, the lease with his signature, the corporate registration showing me as the sole owner of Sterling Properties. Derek collapsed back into his chair. His face had gone from red to gray. Linda grabbed his arm, her hands shaking. "Carl," Linda whispered. "What is this?" I looked at my sister, the woman who had once promised to always protect me, the woman who had forgotten that promise the moment she found someone who could give her a bigger house and a fancier lifestyle. "This is the truth," I said. "I own 63 properties across Greater Boston. Total value is around $18 million. 3 of those properties are currently occupied by people at this table. Every month your rent money flows into my accounts. Every single month for years." The silence was absolute. Brenda looked like she might faint. Megan had tears running down her cheeks, though I suspected they were tears of embarrassment rather than remorse. Bradley had finally put down his phone. Then I turned to my mother. My voice softened. "Mom, the house you live in? I bought it 5 years ago. I set it up through the management company so you would not know it was me. I wanted you to have a safe, comfortable home without ever worrying about rent or landlords. You have been living in my house all along." My mother covered her mouth with her hand. Tears spilled down her wrinkled cheeks. "Carl," she breathed. "My son." I walked over and knelt beside her chair, taking her hand in mine. "I never told you because I did not want you to feel like you owed me anything," I said. "You spent your whole life sacrificing for us. This was the least I could do." I stood up and faced the rest of the table. The people who had spent years looking down on me. The people who had laughed at my clothes and mocked my career. The people who had just declared that I was not good enough to sit with them. "Megan," I said, "you told me that you do not sit with my kind. Let me tell you something about my kind. We do not just sit. We build. We create. We own. You sleep under my roof. You walk on my floors. You live in my property. And you had the audacity to say, 'I do not belong here.'" Megan could not meet my eyes. She stared at the floor, trembling. I looked at Linda, my sister, the person who should have had my back through everything. "Linda, do you remember what you told me when we were kids? You said family never abandons each other. You promised you would always be there for me. I waited for years for you to keep that promise. And you know what I am still here. I never abandoned you even when you forgot I existed. Every month when you paid your rent, you were paying me, and I never raised your rates, not once, because I still believed in family." Linda was sobbing now. "Carl, I am sorry. I am so sorry." I did not tell her it was okay because it was not, but I also did not want to be cruel. Finally, I addressed Derek, the man who had spent decades making me feel worthless. "Derek, you taught your children that a person's value is measured by their suit and their car. You were wrong. Value is measured by what you build when nobody believes you can. I built an empire while you were busy laughing at me. So who is the joke on now?" Derek said nothing. He could not even look at me. I straightened my shirt and took a deep breath. "I am not going to evict anyone," I said. "That is not who I am. But starting tomorrow, every lease will be adjusted to market rate. No more family discounts. You wanted to treat me like a stranger, so now you will pay like strangers." Derek finally found his voice. "You cannot do that. Market rate is double what we are paying." I looked at him with calm eyes. "I can, and I will. Welcome to the real world, Derek. The world where my kind lives every single day." I reached into my pocket and placed enough cash on the table to cover my meal. Then I walked over to my mother and kissed her gently on the forehead. "I love you, Mom. I will pick you up tomorrow, and we will spend the day together. Just us." She squeezed my hand, still crying, but this time I saw pride in her eyes alongside the tears. I walked toward the exit. Just before I reached the door, I stopped and looked back at the table one last time. "By the way," I said, "the next time you want to judge someone by their clothes or their car, remember this moment. Remember who really owned everything you thought made you better than me." Then I walked out into the cool night air, and I did not look back. That night I drove home in silence. No music, no phone calls. Just me and the road and the weight of what had happened. You might think I felt triumphant, that I went home and celebrated my victory. But the truth is more complicated than that. When I got back to my apartment, I sat in the dark for a long time. Yes, I had finally stood up for myself. Yes, I had shown them the truth. But there was no joy in it. How can you celebrate winning against your own family? There are no real winners in that kind of battle. I thought about Linda's face when she realized the truth. I thought about the promise she made me when we were children, huddled under that thin blanket. I thought about all the years I had spent hoping she would come back to me. That first week was difficult. My phone rang constantly. Derek called, leaving messages that started angry and gradually became pleading. Brenda texted apologies that felt hollow. Even Megan reached out, though her messages read more like damage control than genuine remorse. Linda sent me one text. It simply said, "Carl, I need to talk to you. Please." I read it but did not respond. I was not ready. Instead, I focused on what truly mattered. I spent more time with my mother. I drove her to her cancer treatments. I cooked her favorite meals. I sat with her on her porch and listened to her stories about my father, about their early years together, about the dreams they had before life got hard. She told me something during one of those visits that I will never forget. "Your father would be so proud of you," she said, "not because of the money or the properties, because you never let bitterness turn you into someone cruel. You could have destroyed them tonight, Carl, but you did not. That is the man your father raised." Those words meant more to me than any amount of money ever could. As the weeks passed, I began to heal. I threw myself into my work, but with a new perspective. I started a mentorship program for young people from difficult backgrounds who wanted to learn about real estate. I met a young man named Jerome who reminded me of myself at 18, hungry and determined and tired of being overlooked. Watching him grow and succeed brought me more satisfaction than any deal I had ever closed. My friend Marcus, who was also my lawyer, helped me process everything. He told me something wise one evening over dinner. "Carl," he said, "you won. But do not let that victory become a prison. Anger is heavy. If you carry it too long, it will crush you." He was right. Slowly I began to let go of the resentment I had carried for so long. Not because Linda and Derek deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved freedom. Freedom from the weight of proving myself. Freedom from needing their approval. Freedom from the exhausting work of being angry. 4 months after the dinner, Linda reached out again. She asked if we could meet, just the two of us. I agreed. We sat across from each other in a quiet coffee shop. She looked different, thinner, tired. She told me that she and Derek were getting divorced. The revelation at the dinner had exposed cracks in their marriage that had been there for years. Without the illusion of superiority, their relationship crumbled. "I did not come to ask for anything," Linda said. "I just wanted to tell you that I am sorry. Not for what happened at the dinner. For everything. For forgetting who I was. For abandoning you and Mom. For choosing comfort over family." I listened without interrupting. She continued. "I spent so many years trying to be someone I was not. I was so desperate to escape where we came from that I lost the only things that actually mattered. I lost you. I lost Mom. I lost myself." I sat with her words for a long moment before responding. "We cannot go back to how things were," I finally said. "Too much has happened. But maybe we can start something new. Slowly. Carefully." Linda nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I would like that." I did not hug her that day. I was not ready for that yet. But I reached across the table and briefly held her hand. It was a small gesture, but it was a beginning. These days my life looks different. I still run my business. I still drive my old Toyota most of the time, though I have stopped hiding the Mercedes. I have learned that there is nothing wrong with enjoying the fruits of your labor as long as you never forget where you started. My mother's health has stabilized for now. Every Sunday I visit her. Sometimes Linda joins us. We are not the close-knit family we once dreamed of being, but we are trying. That has to count for something. As for Derek, Megan, and the others, they eventually moved out of my properties. I never evicted them, but once the leases adjusted to market rate, they could no longer afford to stay. I heard Derek's family money was not as deep as he always pretended. Last I heard, they downsized to a modest apartment in the suburbs. I take no pleasure in their fall. I simply do not think about them much at all anymore, and that I have realized is the true victory. Not the money, not the properties, not the look on their faces when the truth came out. The real victory is reaching a place where their opinion of me no longer matters, where I no longer need their approval or their respect or even their acknowledgement. I used to think that success meant proving the doubters wrong. Now I understand that success means no longer caring whether they are watching. My niece said we do not sit with your kind. She was more right than she knew. My kind does not wait for a seat at someone else's table. My kind builds their own table. And everyone is welcome to join as long as they treat each other with dignity and respect. So if you are out there struggling right now, if people are underestimating you, if your own family makes you feel worthless, I want you to hear this. Their judgment is not your destiny. Your circumstances are not your conclusion. Keep building. Keep working. Keep believing. One day you will look back and realize that every obstacle was actually a stepping stone. And when that day comes, you will not need to announce your success. You will not need to drop any bombs. You will simply smile, knowing that you became exactly who you were meant to be. Now I have a question for you. Have you ever been underestimated by people who should have believed in you? Have you ever proven someone wrong? Drop your story in the comments below. I would love to hear how you overcame the doubters in your life. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories. Subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that their current struggle is not their final chapter. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And remember, no matter what kind of person others say you are, you get to decide what kind of person you become. Until next time, keep building your empire one step at a time.